Award-winning TV presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, in his closing remarks at the Aqaba summit, called for an end to the armed resistance, replacing it with non-violent resistance. Sharon strongly supports Bush's vision of a two-state solution, one Israeli and the other Palestinian. Meanwhile, Bush promises to preserve the security of Israel.
We must use non-violent means to end the occupation, eliminate the suffering of Palestinians and Israelis, and build a Palestinian state. We are committed to our promise to the people and the international community to respect the law, have one political authority with the legislative authority to preserve the law and general order.
Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine promised to continue with the resistance, saying that Abu Mazen's statements serve Israel's security. 17 people were wounded. 3 of them are in critical condition due to an explosion at an administrative building in the French capital, Paris. The explosion was caused by a gas leak and not a terrorist attack. 15 people were killed and 20 were wounded when a petroleum truck went on fire near a tobacco factory in central Amman, Jordan. The driver lost control of the truck when it turned over and a fire erupted. The spiritual leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warns that any military action on Iran will mean that the aggressors are committing suicide. Meanwhile, tensions increase between the United States and Iran. This is the end of the news in brief. The Palestinian public opinion has doubts about the Aqaba summit. Their past failed experiences lead them not to believe any summit resolutions. Meanwhile, all the Palestinian factions agreed to resist and not to disarm.
Abu Mazen, hold on to your ancestors' land.
In these few simple words, this Palestinian musician summarized the demands of the Palestinian public from their representatives at the Aqaba summit. The hopes of the encircled Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip seem to have been revived following the US President George Bush participation in the summit and Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's new position. However, the majority of the Palestinians doubt that Israel will fulfill the promises they made at the summit, especially since they are still paying with their lives and property.
Israelis have proved in the past that they do not intend to implement any political plan that would benefit the Palestinians. Thus, all these summits do not provide the Palestinians with a minimum amount of security and stability. While the summit was going on, Israel was murdering people, destroying homes, and imposing a curfew in Ramallah and all other cities. This is the real tangible situation on the ground.
The Palestinians listened to Sharon's remarks at Aqaba. However, it did not affect the position or convictions of the Palestinian factions. The Palestinians are used to hearing sweet talk from various Israeli governments. Thus, the Palestinian factions refuted the remarks at the summit, demanding an end to Israel's aggression before being asked to calm things down.
The Palestinian people want a clear and decisive American position to put pressure on Israel, not just on the Palestinians. This continued aggression on the Palestinians must stop. There must be a balance in the United States foreign policy, but it seems like it is an unattainable demand.
With the absence of Arafat from the summit, the Palestinian Authority did not welcome the general statements made at the summit, leaving it up to the international community to make their decision following the implementation of the roadmap.
We received an American commitment directly from the United States President Bush, who promised personally to follow up on the issue. We are waiting to see if Israel will implement the roadmap. However, the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian Liberation Front, and the Palestinian Authority are committed to the agreement.
Both sides have agreed to the roadmap, but the implementation of it will prove its legitimacy. Furthermore, their commitment will be judged by neutral observers. Otherwise, the fate of the roadmap will be the same as all previous plans. Majid Saeed, Abu Dhabi Television, in front of the presidential headquarters, Ramallah.
His Majesty King Abdullah has called for reviving trust in peace and reactivating hopes for prosperity, reconciliation, and coexistence in the Middle East. The Aqaba summit His Majesty hosted today, which brought together U.S. President George W. Bush, Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, and Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, signaled the start of a push to bring permanent Arab-Israeli peace. The king said the roadmap for peace provides security for the Israelis, a state for the Palestinians, and normal relations between Arab states and Israel. Under the roadmap drawn up by the United States, the United Nations, the European Union and Russia, Israel and the Palestinians are to take reciprocal steps leading to a Palestinian state in 2005. Bush, wrapping up 2 days of Middle East summitry, said all sides have made important commitments and the United States would strive to see these commitments fulfilled. He said Secretary of State Colin Powell and Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice would work closely with the parties, helping them move towards true peace as quickly as possible. Bush, who later arrived in Qatar from Aqaba, also tapped John Wolf, Assistant Secretary of State for Non-Proliferation, to lead an American monitoring team to track Israeli and Palestinian steps to carry out the roadmap. In closing speeches at Beit al-Bahar Palace in Aqaba, Abbas and Sharon said they both envisioned a time when Israeli and Palestinian states would live side by side in peace. Iman Lakour reports from Aqaba on the Red Sea Summit.
The landmark Aqaba Peace Summit concluded with an Israeli and Palestinian backing for the roadmap peace plan. His Majesty King Abdullah Hopes of the summit reiterated Jordan's commitment to achieving peace in the region by turning dreams into realities for people of the region to enjoy.
Today we have an opportunity and obligation to reinstate faith in the process and to reinvigorate hopes for a better tomorrow. We simply cannot afford the alternative. Over the past few years, the road to confrontation has shown its consequences: loss of innocent lives, destruction, and fear. Most costly, however, was a loss of hope. The most precious gift that you can present to your peoples over the coming weeks is renewed hope born out of tangible progress on the ground.
King Abdullah urged both the Palestinians and Israelis to end violence and destruction and open a new chapter of peace and coexistence.
I urge you today to end the designs of those who seek destruction, annihilation, and occupation. And I urge you to have the will and the courage to begin to realize our dreams of peace, prosperity, and coexistence. And remember that in the pursuit of these noble goals, Jordan will always remain a true friend.
Setting down a fresh new vision of achieving peace, Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas denounced the use of violence to achieve Palestinian goals and called for an end to the Palestinian Intifada. The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, meanwhile, pledged to dismantle illegal settlements in Palestinian areas and saying that he understands the importance of territorial contiguity in the West Bank, which is a key demand of Palestinians.
We will work alongside the Palestinians and other states to fight terrorism, violence and incitement of all kinds. We can also reassure our Palestinian partners that we understand the importance of territorial contiguity in the West Bank for a viable Palestinian state. Israeli policy in the territories that are subject to direct negotiations with the Palestinians will reflect this fact.
Meeting the Israeli and Palestinian premiers together for the first time of his presidency, the U.S. president hailed the courage of both leaders in pursuing peace, stressing once more his commitment to the establishment of a free Palestinian state.
The Holy Land must be shared between the state of Palestine and the state of Israel, living at peace with each other and with every nation of the Middle East. All sides will benefit from this achievement, and all sides have responsibilities to meet. As the roadmap accepted by the party makes clear, both must make tangible, immediate steps toward this two-state vision. I welcome Prime Minister Sharon's pledge to improve the humanitarian situation in the Palestinian areas and to begin removing unauthorized outposts immediately.
The Aqaba summit breakthrough commitments from all sides followed marathon talks, bilateral and trilateral meetings between all parties. His Majesty has earlier separately met with the U.S. President, the Israeli Prime Minister, and later the Palestinian Premier. Though the roadmap calls for an agreed, just, fair and realistic solution to the issue of refugees, the issue was left to a final phase of negotiations.
The Aqaba summit may signal the birth of the Palestinian state, but with the absence of a monitoring mechanism to ensure that both parties abide by the roadmap, more challenges are most likely to arise, which may put an end to the dream of peace. Iman Lakour, Jordan Television, Aqaba. In an interview with CNN after the summit, His Majesty said he got the impression that the sides were keen to push forward peacemaking in the Middle East. His Majesty said peace would put an end to skepticism in the region, hoping that obstacles which may face the peace process will be overcome.
First thing was obviously the impression of tremendous commitment by the President of the United States to make this thing happen, and he was extremely forceful in that the peace process needs to move forward. And from what we heard from the Palestinian and Israeli delegations, their willingness to work together with the Americans to move it forward. So I came away feeling that there is commitment by all three sides, and there is the dedication to see this through.
And let me ask you why, or if you trust the current Israeli Prime Minister to implement his end of the bargain, taking down settlements, freezing settlements, and all the difficult things that the Israelis will have to do as well.
Well, I think what can be said about both the President of the United States and what people can say about the Prime Minister Sharon is of the men of their words. And when they commit to something, we have to expect that they'll follow through. It's going to be difficult, and we expect to have bumps in the road. But I'm pretty convinced that there's going to be an effort. And again, the United States is going to put a lot of pressure to make sure Israelis and Palestinians commit to what they've said today.
In another interview with Al Arabiya satellite TV channel, His Majesty the King said he was very optimistic in achieving progress in the peace process. The King said a strong U.S. commitment towards the implementation of the roadmap, as well as Arab backing, will play an important role in making the peace plan a success. However, His Majesty warned that there could be difficulties lying ahead in the face of peacemaking, which should be expected by all sides, and collective efforts are needed to overcome them. On Iraq, His Majesty called on the United States and other foreign powers to allow the Iraqis shape their own future, voicing Jordan's support for the Iraqi people. His Majesty the King later left the country, heading to London for a private visit to the United Kingdom. His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hamza took the oath as regent during the King's stay abroad. Despite the peace moves, 2 Palestinians were wounded by Israeli troops who clashed with Palestinian citizens in the West Bank city of Bethlehem. The clashes erupted near the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem after a group of Israeli army officers met with priests and church representatives. One Palestinian boy was shot in his leg and another in the eye during the clashes. Israeli troops left Manger Square outside the church shortly after. In Hebron, Palestinian students have demonstrated against the closure of their university by Israeli troops. About 4,000 young men and women entered the Hebron University ground, breaking the door to the main building and flying Palestinian flags from the rooftop. Meanwhile, Jewish settlers protesting against peace moves with the Palestinians have occupied a Palestinian house in Arab East Jerusalem. The house was occupied by a group of settlers led by right-wing Israeli parliamentary Beni Alon. Many Israeli right-wingers believe that they must remain in all parts of Jerusalem, including Arab neighborhoods.
A spokesman for the Israeli Foreign Ministry, Jonathan Peled, said in Aqaba that Israel may remove up to 24 illegal settlement outposts in the coming weeks if the so-called peace process progresses. However, he also said that such a move would depend on the Palestinians making a serious effort to deal with anti-Israeli operations. Peled said it was unlikely there would be any mention of the outposts in the statement to be made by Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, saying, quote, "Declarations at the summit are one thing, but the day after is when it all starts." But Israeli settlers have expressed their objection to any removal of illegal Jewish settlements erected since March 2001 and freeze expansion of all settlements in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Israeli settlers in the West Bank settlement of Afra, one of the oldest settlements in the West Bank, said the roadmap is the same as Oslo, and more than 2,000 Israelis live in settlements scattered across the West Bank and Gaza, considered by the international community as illegal.
The Palestinians are coming here with a very clear message to President Bush that we need his statements and his enthusiasm to be followed up with deeds and not simply words. We're looking very heavily on the United States to begin to place pressure on Sharon to stop the settlement activity, to dismantle the settlements, and to allow the Palestinians to finally live in peace and freedom.
Palestinian Premier Mahmoud Abbas said he is likely to reach a truce with the resistance groups in Palestine, while a senior Palestinian official said these groups must wait until the Aqaba summit is over before judging the outcome of the summit.
The Palestinians remain steadily determined in keeping the right to resist Israeli occupation to themselves and not to trade it against any price less than the creation of an independent Palestinian state, and before that the Israeli withdrawal from Palestinian territories, the release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails, and the dismantling of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. For this effect, hundreds of Palestinians demonstrated in the Gaza Strip on Tuesday against the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, which officials in both Jihad movement and Hamas branded as blackmail, a conspiracy, and a maneuver.
The Intifada is a will of the people in the Arab and Islamic nation. No one can turn it off by a remote control or by pressing keys. The resistance will continue despite all the conspiracies against it.
The
summit is very clear. It wants the Palestinian people to accept the roadmap and implement it, though it provides Israel with security. And it comes after the Israeli enemy failed in doing so during 3 years via his military choices. The roadmap is an exit for the Israelis, and we refuse that Arab pressure be exerted on the Palestinian people without supporting them against the US and its policy.
There is no peace with Sharon in the near future. This necessitates a united Arab position and forming a united leadership and a mechanism in decision-making. We can search for common means to keep the consensus on continuing the Intifada and resistance as a legitimate right, as long as the occupation exists and as long as occupation troops do not pull out from our Palestinian land.
But Hamas, as the other Palestinian groups, is ready to stop anti-Israeli operations if there is a guarantee that Israel take the preliminary steps as part of a wide-scale withdrawal and not the final steps. Ismail Abu Shanab of Hamas said in an interview late Tuesday he would like the United States, quote, the only power that can pressure Israel to withdraw, to guarantee all these things even if it is step by step. For his part, Palestinian Foreign Minister Nabil Shas said Hamas and Jihad should wait for the results of the Israeli-Palestinian U.S. summit in the Jordanian resort of Aqaba before speaking out against the U.S. Arab summit in Cairo. Shas said Hamas and Islamic Jihad will have no choice but to end what he called violence if Israel pledges to do so at the summit Wednesday in Jordan. Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas said he was confident that accords could be struck with the Hamas and Islamic Jihad movements to end military operations in the occupied territories. Abu Mazen said he managed to convince them that this is the only way because of international and regional developments. As he concluded, there was no need to use force or violence against them.
Israeli occupation forces released tens of Palestinian detainees, promoting the so-called Israeli goodwill gestures ahead of the crucial Aqaba summit. However, on the ground, occupation troops demolished the houses of 3 detained Palestinians and left some 31 of their family members homeless. And the occupation army shot and wounded over 50 Palestinians during an aggression against the Nablus refugee camp.
As preparations for the Aqaba summit were carried out in a bid to push forward the so-called roadmap to peace, Israeli occupation forces also pushed forward their aggressions against Palestinians. Occupation troops blew up the homes of 3 Palestinian detainees from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades in Israeli detention camps. 31 relatives of Safwa Jabbour, Hussam Aruri and Mohammed Zain became homeless in the southwestern town of Yatta. Some voices in Israel have questioned the deterrent value of the demolition policy, arguing that Palestinians are apathetic toward these actions and still carry out these operations against Israeli occupation forces. Our correspondent in the West Bank reported an Israeli curfew was imposed in Jenin city and that Israeli forces occupied a building used for public services. Occupation troops also besieged the Balata refugee camp in Nablus and closed its entrances for the second day. Meanwhile, over 50 Palestinians were wounded as Israeli troops fired rubber bullets at them as they were defending Nablus city and its camp from being invaded. In a bid to polish its image and spare itself from comments, the Israeli government released tens of Palestinian detainees Tuesday in what it called a goodwill gesture ahead of the Aqaba summit. Israel released the first group of about 100 detainees who lifted their hands with victory signs as they were taken to the West Bank by bus. Israeli officials said that most of the released detainees either suffer from health problems or their time is close to be over. The gesture was not likely to satisfy Palestinians. Israel confessed it's still holding some 3,300 detainees in military detention camps, but Palestinians say there are over 8,000 still in Israeli prisons.
I really don't care for Sharm el-Sheikh because I was in prison for a year and I still don't know on what charges.
Among those released was the longest surviving Palestinian detainee in Israeli detention camps, Ahmed Jbara Abu Sukkar of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who spent 28 years of his life behind bars. He was received as a hero at the Kalandia checkpoint.
Millions of Palestinian refugees are concerned that the so-called roadmap plan will deprive them of their right to return to their homeland. Israel's approval of the roadmap on condition that the Palestinian refugees' right of return is scrapped, and Washington's understanding of this condition have cast more skepticism on the end result of the roadmap. And Lebanon, that hosts tens of thousands of Palestinian refugees, made very clear it will not settle the Palestinians.
This Palestinian woman was among tens of thousands of Palestinians who were expelled from their homes and lands during the 1948 Israeli occupation of Palestine. Abed Dabaja's new residence is the slum-like Palestinian camp of Burj al-Barajni in Beirut's suburbs. Her suitcases had always been ready to be packed to return to her homeland. She now lives alone after her sons settled down in a Western country and gained a new nationality, but she says that Palestine is still in their hearts and their culture, and added that they had visited Palestine and even prayed in the Aqsa Mosque, but are however not allowed to settle in their homeland.
They went in to pray in the Aqsa Mosque, so one of the Israeli guards asked for their identification documents. The guards asked my grandson, saying, "You're a Palestinian." My grandson replied, "Yes, I am, but we have migrated to Denmark, and be sure that someday we will return to Palestine."
Her sons were able to bring her back some photos of the land she was born in, her town Tarshiha. While speaking, she briefly recalled what life was like just as Israelis began their occupation.
They came and told us to go out for 8 days only, and then we can return. My husband would not take anything with him and told me that we probably won't see Palestine again. How can this be? We were thrown out of our country, barefoot and with no clothes. We thought the Arabs would come to rescue us, so we baked them bread and made them fruit juice, but they never showed up.
On the 25th of May, the Israeli government of Ariel Sharon partially approved the so-called Road Map to Peace on condition that Palestinian refugees not return to their country. Votes were 16-1.
So it was a conditional approval of the Road Map, and with the 14 remarks or reservations, actually the map turns even less of a roadmap to more of a labyrinth or a maze. You see, it gives you the impression that a map leading somewhere, going through stages, but in fact it is a maze where you reach no more. Actually, you still go in vicious circles and you reach no way. You reach no independent, sovereign Palestinian state, as it's sometimes said. It doesn't give the Palestinian people the minimum of their national aspirations and first of all their right of return to their homeland. And this, by the way, this does not only include the Palestinians of the so-called diaspora. It includes almost half of the Palestinians who already are living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and no less than 250,000 Palestinians living in Palestine occupied in 1948.
Palestinian refugees felt they were left behind by this US-backed roadmap. In the Burj al-Barajni camp, they angrily said they do not deserve to live in small boxes of concrete when they have a land of 27,027 square kilometers that they should return to. And Lebanon has constantly made clear it will not accept the settling of Palestinians.
This is all wrong. What is this roadmap? It wants to divide Palestine and the whole Arab world. I think that Palestinian officials should review this. We refuse any solution but to return to our country.
The roadmap does not solve the problem, because this Arab-Israeli struggle is a struggle for existence. The only solution is through resistance, because we are all threatened today. This plan started in Afghanistan and reached Iraq, and God knows where it will end, because they would not quit planning against us.
Bush's visit to the region would bring only more pressures on the Palestinian side, and I think more coordination with the Israeli side. They, first of all, of course, they want to get the security component of the roadmap plan accelerated.
It is clear that the US and Israel are now only interested in ending the Palestinian Intifada, and that Washington, in following stages, will exert pressure on host countries to settle Palestinian refugees and shatter all hopes of return. But until then, Palestinians are not likely to stay idle. For many, it is unthinkable to give up returning home.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,